The Lord of the Thundercats gets inspired by LJN. Here's your look at the brand new Super7 Thundercats Ultimates Lino toy version. Lord of the Thundercats Lino is a cunning leader known for his great strength and agility. He wields power with the magical airship of his forefathers, the Sword of Omens, which allowed him to see faraway lands and to contact the Thundercats when there's impending danger. Although Lino is ruler, he is a child in a man's body, constantly challenged to grow in moral strength through the code of Thundera, justice, truth, honor, and loyalty, and Lino always succeeds. Before we see what awaits Lord Lino, we're going to grab the tape measure just to see how tall the figure stands. And don't worry if you are one that wanted to see the comparison between this and the original cartoon Lino. I'll be bringing it in a moment. In the meantime, though, Lino stands in this case a little over 7 inches. 7's technically down there. His hair brings him just a little bit higher. I'm going to say he's about 4¼ inches in height, or the figure in this case is 18 or just a little over 18 centimeters tall. And in the hopes of not letting any of you down, as promised, I'm going to slide over the one that we get here inspired by the original LJN release of Lino. We're going to compare him, along with the cartoon version that we got earlier from the folks over at Super7. Some new tooling has been done in this case for the LJN Lino. It looks like he is obviously sporting a brand new head sculpt, as it should be the case, but it looks like he is using the same arms, the same torso. In fact, it even looks like he's using the same lower legs as the original release, but colored completely different. For those lucky ones that were able to get their hands on the original Lino when he was first pegged back in the 80s, you may then recognize right away that the Sword of Omens and Cat's Claw are colored not in the familiar silver and brown, but rather in the casted color of red, like the original LJN release of Lino. One thing, while it is a nice nod to the original 80s figure, one thing unfortunately Super7 did leave off with this release of the toy version of Lino, which I really wish they could have included, was the power light-up ring. It was something that was still colored in the red plastic, but it involved you as a child or an adult. If you still have that figure as part of your collection, you would wear it as a ring. You'd then plug it onto the back of Lino's body. There was a little hole here in the back, and it would then illuminate his eyes. And while I could certainly understand why a company like Super7 would have wanted just to get the most mileage out of a mold and not start to have to worry about wires and lights, at the very least, it would have been nice that they could have included it in there more as just a nod to the original 80s toy line. Now, I know, again, that's extra plastic, it's extra cost, but if you are going to be releasing a toy version of Lino, yes, it's nice to get a red Sword of Omens, and certainly is nice to get a red Cat's Claw. A red power ring would also have been really appreciated, at least on the person's part behind the camera. What, like I said, he does come included with, though, is the Sword of Omens. Sword of Omens, in this case, as you can see, the blade has been painted silver. The part of the guard has also been painted in silver, and the cat symbol is also painted in silver, while all the rest is left behind to the red plastic. Just to show you, though, that this isn't simply just a remold to the original Lino Sword of Omens, I just wanted to show you, like, for example, the cat symbol is clearly raised, whereas the original cat symbol on the Sword of Omens would have been flat in the cartoon release. Also, the differences don't just start and stop there. If you look at actually the guard is actually sculpted different. While the original one, which I can only best describe as, it looks like a squished robot head. See the little eyes, the little mouth? Okay, that's a bit silly. But this one actually has a completely differently sculpted guard. So they have done a completely different Sword of Omens with this release. And it's also, as well, a lot shinier of a paint that they use for the silver. Whereas, again, this would have just been molded in the silver plastic. Does fit into either one of Lino's hands. He does also come included with the Cat's Claw. Now, the Cat's Claw, like the original release, would have all been molded here in red plastic, and like the Sword of Omens, it's not the same Cat's Claw that we got before, just to bring in the one we got from the cartoon release. This one is rather interesting because not only is it brown, but it also indicates one other change that they did do for the toy release. Like the original LJN version of Lino, it has 4 fingers on the Cat's Claw, while the cartoon version of Lino only has 3 fingers and a thumb. It's rather interesting when you really see it. They plug into his arm the exact same way. Simply you just remove the hand on the one side and then you pop this in place. Obviously, because the original toy didn't have it, there's a smaller version of Sword of Omens, not one that certainly can fit inside the Cat's Claw. So your only option is then to only plug it onto, I was going to say He-Man, but only can plug it onto Lino's arm. but there's no other place. Here's one thing I found a little confusing about this figure. Yes, while you would be able to unplug, just pop that off and replace it then with the cat's claw, you'll notice a rather awkward looking peg here on the side of Lino's torso. Well, the original toy had this as well, not the original LJN toy, no, well, he has his arm up right now. I'm going to bring in the original Lino. The original Lino also did have a version of a cat's claw that it already had a lunged in there, or permanently attached Sword of Omens. Well, it's not so attached, you could slide it off. But the idea is that there would have been a hole here on the side, and then you just plug it on you just tab it on to the side of the figure's body. That made sense for this version of Lino. I can't understand why they just, I mean, obviously if they reused the same mold, which seems to be the case, why wouldn't they have then taken the time to remove this part? I don't think this should have even been there in the first place, because really when you then look at the cat's claw, which I have right over here, there is no hole on it. There's no place anywhere on here that you can then plug onto it. Either they should have just left it off, or at the very least they should have put a hole on the cat's claw you could then have attached onto Lino's body. That's obnoxious. Let's go ahead and remove his hand for right now. Take and pop that off, and then replace it then with the cat's claw, and it plugs perfectly in place. And then, of course, you can take yourself this Sword of Omens, which I happen to have over here, just widening the grip a little bit here of the hand. The hands themselves, actually the plastic itself is pretty soft. It's pretty easy to fit the Sword of Omens in there. And that's what he looks like fully equipped. He doesn't really technically need any of these other hands. I would almost even use the argument that instead of using these hands, or at the very least, these hands right here, because they're very similar in design, why would they have not just simply taken the time and used this plastic to create the power ring? I know we're still talking about the power ring. The hands also, when you look at them too, one thing that does make them a little bit different from one another is that they swivel the opposite way. See, these hinge forward and back, these hinge side to side. But really, again, would you not have wanted to use that plastic instead for the light-up power ring? Okay, I'm going to stop talking about that. The last thing that Lino does come included with, of course, is a couple of gestured hands. It doesn't look like they're painted at all. Instead, rather, it looks like they're just molded in this color of plastic. And then, of course, the other thing that comes included with this Lino, too. Not like the original toy. The original toy just had Lino with a neutral expression. But you have a little more of an angry expression, like he smelt something funky in the room. Ooh, what is that? Snarf? Snarf? Where did Snarf leave his mess this time? It's colored really nicely, though. Even though it's not really like the original LJN version of Lino, I might actually settle on the idea of displaying him with this head sculpt, because I really like the look of this one. To show you the difference between the two, let's go ahead and remove the Sword of Omens for right now. Put that to the side. And while this one, again, is much closer to the original LJN release of Lino, I do really, again, like the angry expression. And maybe I'll settle for this one. To change out the heads, by the way, you can see also as well the hair seems sculpted exactly the same. Although, funny enough, the angry expression seems to have a more shinier hair than this one right here. But to pop the head off, you're just going to remove it from the ball joint. If you're having any problem to do this, by the way, you can also heat this in hot water or use also a hairdryer. Hairdryer also works perfectly fine too. And then we're just going to pop that back into place. Wiggle it onto the ball joint. Probably should have heated this up a little bit more than what I did. There we go. It's all the way in. I think it's all the way in. All right. And there we have Lino now with his swapped out head. For the rest of the figure's body, just once again to bring in and rely on the original version of Lino that we got from Super 7, seems to be once again the exact same body. Colors get left off, at least in this case, the strap section of his top of his tunic. Would that be considered a tunic? Does have the additional striping of the blue that they have left off. But to be fair, again, like the original toy also had just the basic blue plastic. It's nicely well painted. You can see as well, there's the cat symbol down below here. My cat symbol, I've looked at a couple of other reviews of this. Mine is a little off. You can see it's facing the wrong way. I don't know what it's roaring at, but it certainly isn't roaring the right way, I feel. It probably should be a little bit straighter than what it is. To be also, though, really fair to look at the original Lino, it's also, mine unfortunately, something about these cat symbols, mine was also way far down on his belt. The belts, by the way, are exactly the same to one another. The legs are also seem to be sharing the same plastic. See, molding at least, and the boots are also identical to one another. Obviously, in this case, the boots of the toy version of Lino, I keep wanting to say the toy version of Lino, does have a lot more darker of a blue, and the brighter white of the striping is a lot more standout than the one we got before. One thing I also did do while I looked at other reviews of this guy is I couldn't help but notice that my legs are wrong. No, not my legs, but the legs of the figure are too far down. You can see the way the plug in. And I've seen other videos where these are supposed to be a lot higher than what they are. Every opportunity I get to try to force these further up, they keep wanting to shimmy themselves back down. I don't know what it is exactly about it, but I've seen other ones where the leg, the thigh at least, goes a lot higher and doesn't have the visible socket showing here for the leg articulation. Speaking of legs, though, I've got, unfortunately, a little bit of loose legs here. This should not be the case the moment you get a figure already out of the packaging. I barely played with this guy, and you can already see how loose his legs have already started to, well, not even started to develop. They were loose like this when I got them out of the, got this guy out of the packaging. Should not be as loose as what he is. For the articulation, though, for Lino, his head is on a ball joint. It's actually on a ball post, so it rotates all the way around. It does hinge up quite high and looks down fairly low. You can also move it back and forth as well. Shoulders come out. They seem to be on pin and socket joints. You can easily hinge those out. Take the arms, rotate them all the way around as well. The figure has a bicep swivel. Single hinge only, although while you're doing this, sometimes you pop the cat's claw off. Single hinge only in the elbow, but it does allow at least the form to rotate back and forth. And while I wouldn't be able to do it on this side, you can at least rotate the hand all the way around and hinge it back and forth. The figure does have an upper torso crunch. You can also rotate the waist. Legs do split out, but once again, I don't know why mine sit as low as they do. Not mine, Lino's. Take the legs, move forward. You can move them back. There's a mild swivel at the top of the thigh. Single hinge on the knee. Articulation, there's really no articulation here in the boot, but you can somewhat rotate the lower leg. And then there's also the ankle articulation that you come to expect now when it comes to these Super 7 releases. Short of maybe having the legs a little too low, short of the fact that, yeah, the legs are a little loose on Lino, and short of the fact that the figure, unfortunately, doesn't come included with a power ring. Let's stop talking about that. It's a nice-looking Lino. I don't know how far down the rabbit hole I really do want to travel when it comes to collecting now the toy versions of the Thundercats. Oh my goodness. I'm already now collecting the cartoon Thundercats Ultimate figures, still continue to collect those. I don't know, again, how far down the rabbit hole I really want to go when it comes to collecting these. I might start and stop with Lino, although I've seen already that there's postings. There's stock available for where I got this guy over at Entertainment Earth. I think there was stock already for Mumra, stock already for Monkeyan, stock already for Chitara. It is seriously going to be down another rabbit hole that this person behind the camera is going to go down. Having already collected these, I could easily now, I could see myself now starting to collect these as well. And just before we jump over to final looks of the figure, one last thing I did want to show you guys was the packaging that came included with the toy version of Lino. Here's the packaging right here. Normally I would not be one to bring in the packaging as we already had a look at the beginning of the video, but I did want to draw your attention to also the way they changed it to the original Ultimates version of Lino. See how the more matte finish goes along with the toy version. The then Lino that came include the original Lino that we looked at from the Ultimates line had a more shinier looking package. That also includes the cat symbol, which has a much more red foil approach to it, whereas this one, again, is a much more matte finish. And you can also see one thing that's very different as well, is that they also added down below toy version, whereas this one, the original one, only has straight Lino. Okay, now we can actually jump over to the final looks here of Lino, the toy version released by the folks over at Super 7. Never had the chance to get the original toy Lino. You may think to yourself, well, it was because he was sold out, right? No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. I wanted to get myself a Lino, and I was very determined to get one until my friend Damon at the time talked me out of getting Lino in favor of getting a Panthro. Quoting, I already have a Lino. If we are going to be playing Thundercats together, it makes no sense to have two Linos. He totally talked me into getting a Panthro. What was funny about that whole story is the fact that Damon moved away weeks after he talked me into getting a Panthro. And while I would be excited eventually when Super 7 does release a toy version of Panthro, having then being able to say that, well, in that review, hey, I already had the original Panthro, I wish I could instead have been saying I had the original Lino. Curse you, Damon, who moved away weeks after you totally talked me into getting a Panthro. Damon's not even totally watching these videos. It doesn't really matter anyways. Now that I've got that off my chest, getting a closer look at the chest of Lino, that doesn't seem right. And the rest of the figure's body, yes, it is using the same mold as the one we got before. But, I mean, to be fair, I can't imagine why they would have reused or used a brand new mold to give us simply a toy version or toy colored version of the original Lino. At the very least, we do have ourselves a brand new head sculpt. Two, in fact. We do have the cat's claw, which for no reason whatsoever does not plug into the side of the figure's belt. Why is that peg there? Why is that peg there? I still don't know. And like in the original toy, the cat's claw and the Sword of Omens are colored in red, not silver and brown that we're used to seeing. A nice looking figure. I just wish that mine wasn't loose in the legs, and I certainly wished as well that the thighs weren't so shimmied down on the pegs. I'm going to see if I can try to heat this up in hot water, just enough to maybe soften up the plastic, and I can give it a heave-ho. Push the leg up a little further up the leg. I don't know why mine is so visible. When I've seen other reviews of this guy, his leg seems to be in the same place as the other lino. My other lino is fine. Yet this one, of course, mine has to be the one. Has very visible leg pegs down below. Leg pegs down below. If you guys, though, are interested and you want to get your hands on lino, maybe because you have the original lino still in your collection, curse you, Damon, I'll put the link certainly down below. That will take you on over to Entertainment Earth's website, to which I did actually pick this guy up for myself. They still, at the time, at least when I did order lino, they had Mumra, they had Chitara, and I think they had Monkean, all the toy versions of those figures. I don't think they still have them, but I'm going to periodically go back and check again, because while I did convince myself that I was done with Thundercats, at least I was happy just to get the toy line, and that's where I continue to focus more of my efforts for. Now that I've got myself lino, and now that, because again, it's a painful reminder of Damon talking me out of getting this guy, I could probably see myself getting the rest of the toy versions of Thundercats. Down the rabbit hole I go. What do you guys think of this figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. Have you had the chance to pick up this figure for yourself? Or did you have the original lino? Let me know down below. Rub it in the comments section down below. Also, as well, if you enjoyed this video, I want to hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and certainly on board to see more, then make sure you hit the subscribe button down below, and that you're also turning on the bell notification. There's going to be more Super 7 stuff coming your way. So as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.